Thanks for joining me on episode 514 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Wayne Titus, author of The Entrepreneur's Guide to Financial Well-Being. I encourage you to be inspired to become a better steward through financial wisdom by listening to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, with my friend Scott Mader.
I love this idea of taking times in your life and taking a step back and doing what I call the Dr. Phil moment. Taking the step back and looking at something and going, so how is that working for me? Is that getting me where I want to go? Is that giving me what I want it to give me? Am I still getting out of this what I'm putting into it? Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's episode about impacting the world through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about the concept of revisions when it's not working for you, why you can marry the goal but switch out your process, and why sometimes having a Dr. Phil moment is often good for us. You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast. We talked a little bit yesterday about setting resolutions and turning those into goals and working with others if you wanted to be more effective. And today I wanted to talk a little bit more related to this topic of getting things done for the new year and really focusing on how this year can be different. And, there's an expression that winners never quit. And we've talked before on the podcast in earlier episodes about how that expression isn't completely true. How the truth is that there are times where as a winner, you identify things that are not working for you. You identify problems or challenges or things that you've been doing for a long time that perhaps are no longer effective or were never effective, but have been built up as limiting beliefs or as habits that are holding you back from really succeeding and doing what you really want to do. And the truth is, it is true that winners quit, but they quit the things that are keeping them from success. They don't quit just when things are hard. They don't quit on their massive goals. So if you think about resolutions, if you're resolving to get your money in order this year, if you're resolving to get healthier this year, if you're resolving to walk more, eat better, or if you're resolving to do any of these sorts of things like start your dream business or begin to work on your side hustle in your spare time and maybe watch less TV and waste less time, but get more effective with the use of your time in doing what you've been called to do, then the truth is those sorts of things, those are big ideas. Those are value-based ideas. Those are things that are focused on growing yourself in a more effective way. And those things you shouldn't give up on. However, if, for instance, you've been trying year after year after year to start your side hustle and you've not been able to do it, it's just not worked out. It's just never come to fruition. Then what you do need to understand is it's not the goal that you quit on. Instead, it's the process that you've been using. You take a step back and you look at how you've been doing it, and you come up with a new way to do it. That may involve working with someone when in the past you haven't. That may involve just a new book or a new set of information or a new course. It may involve learning something or doing something, and it may involve not doing something. It may actually involve quitting on something so that you can succeed on getting something that's more important to you. You stay married to the goal, but you can revise the process. It's important to recognize that there is a time and a place for quitting. There's a time and a place for revising, for shifting, for changing. You can pivot and move in a new direction. And one of the things I talk about all the time is the idea that it's always easier to move and to pivot and to shift when you're already in motion, when you're active, when you're doing something, because doing it gives you feedback. It lets you know something about what's working. It lets you know something about what's not working. It lets you see what the challenges are and therefore begin to come up with new techniques or new ways of doing something, or it opens up opportunities to do something new and different. This is the idea of revising rather than quitting. The difficulty sometimes is knowing what are the things I should quit, what are the things I need to stay connected to and married to and focused on, and what are the things that I don't need to quit, but I do need to revise. I do need to make a shift, a change, an adaptation. I need to inject some new habits or some new systems or some new processes or new activities into the process. You know, I love this idea of taking times in your life and taking a step back and doing what I call the Dr. Phil moment. You know, taking the step back and looking at something and going, so how is that working for me? Is that getting me where I want to go? Is that giving me what I want it to give me? Am I still getting out of this what I'm putting into it? And I'm not talking here about giving up on things. I'm not talking about taking the easy way out. Oftentimes, the things that are the most difficult, the most challenging, the things that are the hardest are the very areas where you look at it and you go, you know, honestly, that's something that I want really badly, but I'm not actually doing what I need to do to make it happen. I'm not making the sacrifices I need to make. I'm not giving up the time or the energy or the focus that it needs. And the fact that I think it's going to come easily and magically is actually what's holding me back. And I need to give that up so that I can begin to get what I really want, so that I can begin to move towards being in alignment with my calling, so that I can begin to grow a little more today than I did yesterday, so that I can begin to step forward instead of stepping backwards. So the homework for you is to take a moment. If you haven't already done this year, if you didn't take a moment for this annual review and planning that I've been talking about, if you haven't stepped back and looked at what you're doing in the various areas of your life, that's something that you can do now. And you can do this at any phase in your life. You can do this at any time. You step back and you think, how's that working for me right now? How is this going? Is this getting me towards the direction that I want to go, or is it not? You have a Dr. Phil moment and you ask yourself, how's that working for me? And be honest in the answers. And when you find those things that aren't working, begin to replace them with things that are. And if you need help with that, you can reach out to me. You can set up a time. Go to inspiredstewardship.com, new year, all one word, new year, and set up a 30-minute call for $1. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can bring focus to your new year so that you can have the most successful 2020 ever. Thanks for listening.